Hi, everyone. Welcome to the God Attachment Healing Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Landa. This podcast is dedicated to helping Christians who want to understand why they relate to God, themselves, and the church in the way that they do. I explore how our early childhood experiences with our parents influence how we relate. I discuss how we can find healing from the pain, confusion, doubt, fear, and anger experienced in these relationships. If you're interested in learning more about your attachment style and how to heal from the pains and struggles you've experienced, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the show. I'm happy you're here. Alrighty. Well, welcome back to the God Attachment Healing Podcast. I am excited to start another episode here with my friend Tyler Cooper. And Tyler and I, we go way, way back, starting from a church and then kind of moved and just kind of God had some other plans for him and has taken him different places. And Tyler, it's good to catch up with you, man.
Likewise, man. Hey, this is a long time coming. I've been wanting to be on your show for quite a while, so I'm glad we're able to finally make it happen.
Yeah, man. Me too. Excited to do that, and more excited about the impact of how God has been using you, and obviously seen from afar, kind of what where life has taken both of us, where it's taken you, and kind of the struggles and loss that you and your wife have experienced in your family. It's been, I'm sure, difficult, and it's also been a testimony to those of us who have been watching, whether it be from afar or close by. So I'm really excited about this topic because I know it's going to bless a lot of people. So before we get started, so for those of you who are listening, I know there's recently been a lot more reviews, and I've been really excited about that. And I just want to ask that you continue to do that, continue to provide reviews for the podcast. It really helps kind of get it out there and continuing to hear stories that can be a blessing like the one we're about to hear today. So please do that. You can do it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and all that. Or if you follow on Spotify, same thing. And again, just thank you for supporting the show. I really appreciate it. And we'll go ahead and jump into our topic here with my brother Tyler. So Tyler, I know your story. A lot of people that probably listen to the show, or a good number of people that listen to the show, probably know you as well. Have a couple of friends who listen to the show. But for those who don't, why don't you give us like a short background of where you're from, how you grew up, and what was it like growing up where you lived?
Okay, yeah. Well, at this point in my life, I basically cut my life into thirds. And the first third of my life was in like rural Illinois, farm town Illinois. I remember a whole lot of that. I remember we didn't have much. My parents did a great job of making sure we didn't feel that though. And always in church. Like I don't remember a time I've been in church since 9 months before I was born. Like that's just how my family has been for generations. Church going people, and it wasn't until we were I was probably in third grade or so that my parents went to an event at our church, and the gospel landed in their hearts and changed them. And the Bible and every conversation we had about God, like everything just kind of came to life for us. And so I can just tell like this was real. Something had happened in their lives, and the way that they treated each other, the way they loved each other and loved us, and something had changed.
So they were church goers, but they hadn't received the Lord yet.
Yeah, exactly right.
Oh, wow,
They
okay.
up in church but never really grabbed onto the gospel and let it and let the Lord actually. I think they had all the right pieces in place, but they hadn't reached that point of faith and lordship yet, which is where a lot of people, they come right up to that brink, but aren't willing to take that step. And it was when I was probably in third grade that they did take that step, and it was a game changer for our whole family. So,
wow.
So it took a couple of years for the Lord to work on me, but it was through that whole process and one pretty serious event right before a big move from rural Illinois to Charlotte, North Carolina, that God got my attention. It was a car accident my mom was in, and just kind of shook me to my core and helped me realize that, tomorrow's not promised. The same thing could happen to me. And if it didn't go well, what would happen? And
how old were you?
I was 11 at that point,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
11 or 12, and had my first real conversation with God. Started out as a venting session, kind of angry at him. Like, how could you let something like this happen to someone who loves you so much? And
Mm,
and over the course of that prayer, he molded I just kind of changed my perspective and changed my heart and helped me realize in over the course of that one prayer, my need for him. And I ended up putting my faith in him that night. And
mm,
just while my mom was in the hospital healing from from this car accident, um,
wow.
we moved to Charlotte and got connected to a great church. And that's kind of the second third of my life where I discover and really figure out what it means to not just attend a church, a great church, but belong to one. To I just put my faith in Christ. I was baptized. I began serving and fell in love with the church and what God was doing in the world through it.
Mm,
And so that was really what marked that season of my life. And as I reached the end of that season, as I kind of went into college and worked my way through college and making decisions about career, it's weird that I never really made the connection between my love, like my deep affection for the church and for the Lord and what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I just kind of
mm,
mindlessly chose, what my dad did, or the fun, the most fun aspect of what my dad did in business, went for marketing, and didn't really ever invite God into that conversation at all. And so
mm.
went to a passion conference, and it was at that passion conference in 2006 that God revealed to me, like, what am I doing? Like, why have
Mhm.
I chosen this route for my life when at least invite God into the conversation, invite your maker into the conversation,
Right.
what you're going
Yeah.
to do for the rest of your days. So,
Mm,
yeah, ended up just kind of leaving that conference empty handed. And a few months later, I got a call from a friend of mine who was interning at our student ministry. She was like, I need somebody to fill in for a group for seventh grade guys. And I walked with those guys through seventh
mm.
grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade. God broke my heart for the younger generation through that process. And before I knew it, I was off to Lynchburg, for seminary. And that's where
Wow. Yeah, yeah. So that's where it all started, huh?
that's right.
Yeah. And I can testify to that, Tyler. I mean, even now, whenever I catch up with Rob, you remember Rob, we
Yeah.
talk about right. Shout out to Rob. We talk about that the time that we had together and how hard that split was. Remember when we was growing so much and we had to do that split and all of that. But remember your heart for that. And I do always remember that. And even part of the way that we're connecting now, is came from that, from
Yeah.
you reaching out. And again, something that I really really appreciate. And in that process, prior to that, and this I had thought about a while back. It was just busyness of life and so on. But remember seeing you and your wife go through this stage of life where loss seemed to be the theme. And it sounds like there was a lot of experiences even prior to that where it was either close to or something, right? The moving around and so on. But a lot of that is influenced by what our parents teach us about God and what we learn about God as we're growing in his ways. So what was it like for you? What did your parents teach you about God, whether it be through example or through word? And what did you learn about God in those early stages when you were making these transitions to adulthood?
Like I said, I think my parents did a great job of realizing that more of Christian life is caught than taught. And so
Mhm.
some stuff was communicated verbally and explicitly. A lot of it was just modeled for me.
Mm.
Um, I have a lot of appreciation for the way that they did parenting and the way they brought me up, and my sisters and I. I would say from my mom, probably the most significant thing she did for me was to show me what the love of God's like, just in the way that she loved me. You
Mm.
know, more than anything she said, or more than anything she ever sat me down and taught me. It was just the way that she loved me, and
Mm.
the way that she loved me in the sense of, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying. I'll sacrifice. The same way that the things that Jesus did for us, I saw in the way that she loved us.
Mm.
It's fierce. And so it's just this unbreakable, unstoppable love. And my dad, um, I think probably the most significant moment that I could point to where he showed me something about who God is and about how to win at life, and about especially at the Christian life, was this moment when I was 16 years old. Um, he invited some of the men in my life, the men in my family, the men that were kind of family friends and
Mhm.
leaders in church, to not just write letters, but also come to our home when I was on my 16th birthday. And
Wow.
one of them kind of had a moment to speak over my life and just kind of speak wisdom to me, and show, like, just yeah, to demonstrate, not just demonstrate for me with their lives, but to speak explicitly in those moments about this is what it means to be biblically a man.
Mm.
And it's
Mm.
time to make that pivot. It's time to make that change. It's time to make that take that step. That you
Wow.
need to be somebody who rejects passivity. That's something that
Mm.
every guy struggles with from the beginning.
Mhm.
We need to be accepting responsibility and leading courageously, and looking forward to God's ultimate reward, and having Him as our ultimate end, and running hard after Him. So yeah, those are some big things, some big moments, or ways that my parents showed me, maybe not
Mhm.
what they taught me, but showed me some powerful truths about who God is, and how to win.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, bro. That's so great. And one of the things um that's really cool about it is that it was both spoken and lived out. But you're right. I mean, what we learn the most is what we see our parents do. And sometimes there can be a disconnect between that. Like one of the things could be they modeled for us what it was to love, but maybe they didn't share or say as much "I love you" and said that to us often, or maybe they said it so much, but they didn't show on the other hand. So it's always a blessing to see that. But then there comes the stage as we're going into adulthood where now we either question maybe what our parents have taught us, or maybe we ourselves are trying to work out our faith as we enter these new stages of life. Did you
Yeah.
happen to experience that at all? Early 20s or when you graduated college or anything?
Going through a season of doubt, and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind
kind of like question because you saw you had the example, you had your parents love you, they shared words of wisdom with you. But somewhere along the line, it's like we have this sense of doubt or we question so many things that they did teach us, and we start wrestling with that. So what was that like for you?
of. I definitely, I don't remember having a season where I had a crisis of faith
Mm,
necessarily, but I definitely had moments where I would question whether or not I was in, whether or not I had salvation truly because of sin in my life.
mhm,
If I was really a follower of Jesus, would I really be doing this? Would I really be doing this again?
mm,
And so there were definitely seasons like that where, like, why am I continuing to do this? And what does that say uh, about my security?
mm,
And so that was really more the crisis that I had, probably in my early college years,
mhm,
right at that time where God was revealing some big things to me. It was right on the cusp of that. But I don't think that I ever really had a season of, like, disbelief. Once I came to that point, in my early teen years where I was all in, I was all in. Um,
that's great.
yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm fortunate that way. I don't credit that to myself, but God is just He's shown Himself in every season to be very present and very good, and even in the most hard, even the most difficult seasons. And it was in a difficult season that my salvation happened. So it wasn't,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm,
it, that's what I would look back to anytime a difficult thing would happen. Uh,
hmm
Presence with me, His salvation of my soul, and His presence with me from then on.
Right, right. Yeah. No, and bro, it seems like it's in those moments, right? The most painful moments of life where we start to see kind of God's love and grace, right? A little bit about my backstory growing up in a, very traditional Baptist church. So I understood truth and law pretty well, but didn't understand the love and grace side as much until I moved here. So a lot of that cultural a lot of that just based on the where we grew up and what we were taught. But when I did understand it, it was so comforting to know that when you do go through difficult times, that you can still experience God's love and his grace, and maybe even at a deeper level than we would if we weren't in that time of suffering. So what has God taught you through those times of suffering, or when have you experienced God's love and grace the most? As we kind of enter into your testimony here about the losses of your children.
Yeah. Honestly, the times that I've seen God's grace and his love and his presence the most, times I've experienced his love most powerfully, are the moments that I've hurt most deeply. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just one of the, yeah, it's interesting that way.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way that it goes, the good moments that I had were good, but it wasn't until, I was in college or a little bit beyond that I realized, that I even needed to like pause and thank God for those moments. It was when pain though came into my life. The moments that I felt God most closely are the moments that I was hurting most deeply. And that was never more true than 3 years ago when my wife and I experienced our first loss in the middle of her pregnancy and second trimester of her pregnancy. At the first 3 decades of my life, like I experienced pain, I experienced loss, but this was a unique thing. This was
Yeah.
something different, and it was a deeper, darker valley than I'd ever walked through. It was more pain than I ever expected God to allow into my life. I had a pretty cushy life for 3 decades, and it was yeah. But those were the moments that I sensed God's presence most closely and saw him at work most powerfully, for sure.
Yeah. And brother, I mean, we've all heard it before. It's a different thing when you experience it, I'm sure, but that there's nothing like the loss of a child. So personally, for me, looking from afar, I remember the first time, you guys had shared that. I mean, it hit me. I think at the time, maybe, I think we already had, yeah, by that time we already had Bo and Beck. And I think after that, I think it was after that we had a miscarriage, but that was so early on, I didn't even feel it. So when you shared how far along you guys were, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what that was like. And even now, as you talk about it, does it still carry that same way? Like is it like your mind goes straight back to that moment and you feel everything, or what is that like now? I was nervous a little bit about
Yeah.
touching on this topic, as you know, but I also know that there is so much healing and that there's a lot of people who go through and don't talk about it.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah.
another thing
That's
too.
absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And I think that's a generational thing. I think up to
Mm-hmm.
this point, there's really been no talk about that experience whatsoever. I was floored, like when we went through it the first time around, to learn that
Mm-hmm.
1 out of 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. It's that common. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it's yeah, I can't even imagine, not talking about this and not
Mm-hmm.
verbalizing some things to not only just for your own processing, but also, to help other people, to help them understand that they're not the only ones who've gone through
Not
this.
feel
This is a
alone. Yeah.
very common thing, much more common than I realized. Um, Remind me of your question again at the very beginning there.
Yeah, yeah. Do you still feel like the same feels when you had that first loss, and then there were other times as well. But yeah, how
Yeah.
does it feel talking about it now?
Yeah. Going back 3 years, like that was, uh, I think the fact that we were blindsided is what made it so unbelievably difficult. It was 3 days after my birthday. We were going in for the anatomy scan. Hopes were through the roof, and
Mm,
expectations were through the roof, and excitement was through the roof. And then to get in that to the ultrasound room, and to hear the words "no heartbeat," like I mean, just a soul crushing. Those are two soul crushing words,
mm-hmm,
and uh, and no one had showed me up to that point how to walk through the grief process.
mm-hmm,
So I just kind of like sat in that for a little while, and then just tried, and then at some point tried to force it down or push it aside and try to lead my family the best I could through this.
mm,
I guess we could probably get to that in a little bit, but 3 years later, having processed things properly, we're at a point now where, it's still difficult. It's more difficult for my wife than myself. She feels it more deeply. She remembers
Mm.
every anniversary, every date, and she has to remind me a lot of, do you know what today is? I'm like, oh shoot, I know, I'm terrible,
Mhm.
and but she feels it much more deeply than I do. um
Mm.
I think that's one of the things we learned, is that men and women are going to process things like this very, very differently, and that's
Yeah.
okay. That's
Hmm.
okay. And we were warned about that at the front end. You have to know that on the front end so that you don't resent each other through it. Like, why aren't you feeling what I'm feeling? Do you not even care? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And you're the oldest of three, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, I
You're the
am.
oldest of three, father, husband. There is this innate desire to be strong. And to be strong means not to show emotion, or it means to just kind of process internally. And that's just my way of processing. And no one else has to know what I'm going through or experiencing, you know? And so tell me a little bit about that, because I get that, where you just want to be strong, but at the same time, everyone maybe thinks that you're not having any feelings towards the difficult situation that you're going through, including family.
Yeah, exactly right. Um, yeah, it was. Yeah, like I said, coming out of that, I just wanted to. I knew that I was the man. I knew I needed to lead my family,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I hated. I hate. I was. It
Mm.
I almost skipped past the denial to anger both times. We had a loss. We lost our daughter Trinity in 2020. So in the middle of COVID, all of this is
Mm.
going on, and then in the middle of and then a year after that, in 2021, we lost Josiah, our son, and so two of those back to back, both times just skipping right past denial and right to anger,
Mm.
just feeling angry.
Towards God or towards people?
Toward I like I like to think that it was toward the situation.
Mm.
And I said, I think a lot of times that that it was toward the situation and not toward God. But there was some anger directed vertically, at
Mm.
least for a little while there, while I was processing. Again, like, how could he let something like this happen? And does he not see what I've made my life about? And kind
Yeah.
of self pity or self whatever, maybe my own pride. I don't know, but that was kind of the thought process. So there was some anger there, and again, I didn't know what to do with these feelings. And it was around that time I was introduced to the book, "Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy" by
Wow.
Mark Rogope, I think is his name. Um, have you heard of that book? You read that book?
Well, that title just, I mean, that's what caught my attention. That title just speaks to that.
It is
But I will definitely be reading it
unbelievable.
now.
Points you directly to the Psalms, and helps you to helps you just to see like how helpful that book of the Bible in particular is for processing grief. And he just walks you through this is how biblically we should
Mm.
walk through grief. So we should, first of all, turn to prayer. You need to be verbalizing some things to God. And
Mm-hmm.
even when there might be that anger directed at God or at the situation, or a lot of feelings brewing, we need to be verbalizing some things. And even in the second step is just voice your complaints, even if we're just hurling, you know, the raw feelings that we're experiencing at him. He can
Mm.
take he can
Yeah.
take that. We got to be voicing those things, because frustration is not toxic to faith, and
Mm-hmm.
doubt isn't toxic to faith. Silence is toxic to faith. And so
Mm.
it's silent, it's when we're quiet, it's when we stop, it's when we break that communication with God. That bitterness, anger and bitterness really boil over, and we've got nowhere to no output for that, no
Yeah.
healthy output for that. And that's where our faith can really take a hit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Got to keep that communication going, even if it's just complaints. At a certain point, though, we can ask those why questions. Why this? Why me? Why now? Why again?
Mm.
Certain point, we begin to ask questions. The question of who, those who questions begin to eclipse the why questions, and just remembering who God is, how he's come through in the past, what he's done for us. And that's the moment where pain and belief can coexist. And that's a
Mm.
really important moment to get to in that process, because it's at that point when we're reminded of what God's done for us that we can begin to ask Him for the things that we need, and He wants to give us. He'll always give us the things that we need, and He did in
Hmm.
our story, absolutely. And then the final step to that is trust, and that's where you see so many of these psalms of lament. I think there's 42 psalms of lament in Psalms, and every one of them starts out with, why God,
Hmm.
why have you forsaken me? That familiar psalm, and then the psalms will end with just this incredible word of hope. That's where it always ends. It's that point of trust. So reading that book, that was a game changer for me, and I recommend it for you. And
Good,
I mean,
good.
anybody who's listening right now going through a hard time,
Mm.
I love that book for a lot of people, and
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll continue to, because it was just outside of the Bible. I can't think of a more timely book for me in my
Mhm.
story in the last few years.
And how did you find out about that? Did someone recommend it to you, or
Yeah,
you're
a
just looking
mentor of
for
mine.
stuff?
It had
Okay.
just dropped at that time, and it was
Wow.
the guy who wrote it had gone through multiple miscarriages as well, he and his family, and so
Mm.
it struck a chord from the introduction, and
Made
so
sense.
I
Mm.
just devoured the thing, and it was tremendous.
Yeah. And what was the circle like around you as well? So, being in church, then there comes that aspect too. One of the things that can happen often for us as Christians is when we are involved in church is that when we are going through a difficult time, it's, kind of pulling away. I need to process this myself before I can share. I need to deal with all my feelings first. I need to share this with God. Or the opposite of that, which is then to become overly busy, overly involved, and it just kind of pushes those feelings to the side, right? So
That's
what
my
was
gut reaction. I want to
right?
compartmentalize. Let me just
Yeah.
set this over here, and I'm gonna go work. And
Yeah, yeah.
Christy's
And it
over here.
helps for a little bit, right? And then it just comes back so
Oh yeah,
strong. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
So
and that
what
and
was
that speaks to the difference in how men and women, or at least my wife and I, process this. That I was able to compartmentalize and go to work and escape from time to
mm,
time, and yeah, like the waves of grief would crash, and they would crash really strong and really, really frequently at first, and then it kind of spread out.
mm,
Christy, on the other hand, is just sitting there in it
yeah. Mm,
constantly. She doesn't have the break. There's not a day that goes by, even I think now, that she doesn't think about them and grieve them. And it looks different, but um
mm. Can you share a
again,
little bit about that, brother? What it's like for you as a husband to see your wife go through that, and sometimes maybe feeling like, um, I don't know what to do, or how do I help in this situation, right? Like it's okay, I could push her to God and ask her to depend on God, but what's
yeah,
my role here? Like, how much can I do? What am I
it's
supposed to do?
yeah,
Tell me
it's
about
every
that.
guy's nightmare, right? The guys want to fix. The guys are fixers. We want to say the right thing or do something to make this go away, and there's nothing that can be said, nothing that can be done. um it's about it's ultimately about a ministry of presence, and just
Mm,
or an understanding she's not grieving the same way you are, that she is in this, she experienced this baby was in her, a part of her, for months, weeks or months, and there's just a different, it's a different connection, that she has with this human being. I
mm-hmm,
think there's moments to speak speak words of hope and speak scriptural truths over her, but even more important than that is just being willing to affirm the things that she's feeling, and just pointing her toward being present with her and pointing her towards hope. I think that's what we can do as husbands.
mm. Yeah, yeah. And when the people around you, so church, how did they help in the process too? Because I know that's always been a blessing, when we're going through something difficult.
Yeah, yeah, I mentioned earlier, God always made sure we had what we needed, and that always came in the form of, it seemed like it always came in the form of his people. I never felt God's presence more closely
Mm,
in these seasons because of the people that were around us. And it was they were the ones that were calling and checking in. They were the ones that were sending us
mm.
flowers and sending us plants, to plant outside, to remember our babies. And
Mm,
I've got the wind chime behind me that every time now the wind blows, like I hear that and I think of my kids, and
mm,
just reminded that because of Jesus, they're not just part of my past, they're part of my forever future. And that's just it's a really good reminder. And so having friends that and just Christian community that will do that for you, it is everything in a season like this. And they were providing meals, making sure that we didn't have to think about what we are going to cook, the week after, the 2 weeks, actually probably really a month and a half after that we were just enjoying gaining weight and good food because it just kept on coming. So it was tremendous, even in the middle of COVID. Like that was just the quality of people that were.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So yeah, that was just knowing. They never knew what to say. Nobody knows what to say in that moment, but the fact that they were there and that they were present, again, back to the ministry of presence, that was just knowing that we weren't walking this difficult path alone, that we had people on either side of us holding up our arms when we were exhausted, walking alongside us, cheering us on. Like that's what gave us more hope than anything.
Oh yeah. I love hearing that, brother. I love hearing that. I know that God uses the body to minister to each other. And yeah, when that's there, it's such a blessing, such a blessing. On the personal side, I was thinking about, our interview. One of the questions that came up for me was, did the first loss feel the same as the second loss, or the second loss feel the same as the first loss? I'm sorry. Because I guess in my mind, I thought, okay, well, when you go through one, you feel that, you process, you're angry, you're feeling everything, and then you make sense of it. And the second time comes around and you feel because you've experienced it before, then maybe I can handle it better. Right. But maybe that wasn't the case. It was just as painful. Tell me about, how was that?
I don't know. I would say it was, there was a season in it with the first loss where I went through a season of denial, and there was a numbness there for a while, probably for, I don't know, a week or two. There was none of that for the second one. I mean, as soon as we saw no heartbeat for that second, at that second ultrasound, it was
Anger.
like, just tears, weeping, and then anger. Yeah. I feel like, and I do feel like the process was a little bit quicker, and coming out of that and
the
landing
the healing process.
Yeah. Landing at hope, and we had the same, and we had the same hope all the way through. We had community around us again, and we read the stories of people, and we talked with people who've gone through stuff like this 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and we're just floored at, how could someone do that? How could someone go through that many times? We just realized, though, God is sufficient. I mean, he will be right there with you through any challenge, no matter how difficult or dark it is. That's really the only difference, though. It's the same grief process. It's another human being, that you've lost, and another grieving of what could have been. One was a daughter, one was a son, and so there's a difference there as well.
That's true.
We have 2 boys, and the fourth one was a boy, but the third one was a girl. And just, even now walking around, I see, my friends with these little girls, and I'm wondering just, man, what would it have been like? How great would it have been for my wife to have had, a mother-daughter relationship that she doesn't have. And that heart breaks for her, and that, and me too, but especially her. I have my other son, but I wanted that for her.
Yeah. I know you mentioned earlier that that there was the anger part towards God. I wonder, did at any point did it change your view of God in a positive? Like, did something about God shine a lot more? Like, it was like, wow, I understood this about God before, but now it's just like I have this completely in-depth understanding of this aspect of his character. And maybe another area that was like, gosh, I wasn't ready for God allowing this to happen. Right. Was there any that stood out to you, that a character trait that he has that stood out, and something that maybe surprised you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing that stood out the most, the thing that really struck me through that season, that I really, and the one quality that I came to love more than any other quality of God's, is the his sovereignty. I
Mm,
just coming to that coming awake to that reality of, again, of, he's left nothing in my life to chance. He's not allowing anything into my life without purpose. He's using this to fortify my faith, to strengthen my family. He has purposes in this. Out of this came the salvation of my oldest son, the
mm,
salvation of my niece. I mean, so many gospel conversations with so many people that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
mm,
There's just so many things that have happened because of the pain that he allowed in to our lives. So much good, and I wouldn't I would change things if I could change things, but I'm so grateful for those moments and
mm,
seeing him at work in those moments.
mm-hmm,
Um, I'd say also, just one thing that I came away with is just a deeper appreciation for what's next, and just realizing again and having conversations with my boys over and over again that
mm,
this isn't all there is. There's so much more. And
mm,
reading Randy Alcorn's book Heaven, and just recognizing what Scripture has to say about what's next, and
mm-hmm,
knowing that I have two kids there, like, makes me want to just know as much as I can about what they're experiencing and what their, you know
mm,
reality is day to day.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, just realizing that. And I think he's got a quote in there from C.S. Lewis. It says, the people who made the most, like the greatest impact in this life, are the people that are focused most on the next. And so I think
Mm,
that's kind of driven me to have an even greater impact. Even it's given me even more drive to do more for the kingdom here and now, while I am,
mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
before I'll be there with them. And so,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even when you talk about your boys, I didn't even, think about that aspect of how do you share something like that with your kids? They're 6 and 4. How old are they?
yeah, they're 5 and 7 now.
5 and 7. Okay,
They
5 and 7.
were, yeah, um, they would have been 3 and 5. Is that right?
3 years ago, 4 and 2, maybe.
2 and 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 and 4 when we lost the first, and then 3 and 5. And so, that was the hardest part of it. That was the
Yeah,
hardest
I
part.
mean, I can
And
imagine.
one of the hardest parts anyway, is just coming back and having to tell them that this baby that these babies that they were so excited about
Hmm.
aren't going to be here, you know? Um, so yeah,
Uh,
but it's not been one big conversation. It's been lots of little conversations. We've
mhm,
talked to a lot of people, about a lot of counselors, about how should we approach this. And we've realized that this is something that they're grasping at a certain level here,
mhm,
um, now, but they're going to re-grieve the loss at different points in their development, and
mm,
they're going to feel it all over again. And so this is going to be it's a journey that we're on as a family.
yeah.
It's led to a lot of conversations, and um, a lot of life-giving conversations with my boys. Like I said, it
Mhm,
sparked the salvation of Elliot, and Cohen is
mm,
close on his heels, it seems like. And so, just lots of questions, and lots of dreams about his little brother and sister, and what they're
oh,
experiencing. So
that's great, man. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I imagine those conversations being tough. And but you mentioned something that I think caught my attention, is that the what was presented to you during this time was presence. And I know that that is also what you're going to be able to provide for your boys, you and Christy. We're present. We're here. I don't know what you're processing now at 10, 13, 15 years old, but I'm here. And sometimes, to your point earlier about your parents, even how that speaks volumes. And I do truly believe that just presence of you as a person, as a parent there for them. So that's gonna be great, brother. One of the things that I think sometimes we avoid maybe is the thoughts the negative thoughts that creep in and we'll push them to the side. And you alluded to this kind of as we talk about Psalms, every open, honest thought was there. And then at the end, it was this recognition that God is still over everything and that he's still good. So, were there any thoughts that for you or for Christy that kind of came in? And I understand the anger part and I think a lot of people do just the anger part towards God, towards the situation, towards people, maybe people saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. And why don't you stay quiet? You don't know what you're talking about, whatever the case is. But yeah, what were some of those thoughts that would creep in and you're like, I can't hold on to this thought. I'm experiencing it right now. Okay. I know that this is just part of an emotion, but can you share a little bit about that? I know people will connect with that too.
Yeah, I think for my wife, the biggest, the one that she experienced on repeat and still kind of still deals with from time to time is that it's my fault.
Hmm.
That actually that was probably the lie that we both buy into, but for different reasons. For her, she just feels like she's like, I just didn't give my kids what they needed, and
Hmm.
that's another kind of a soul crushing, idea that you're
Hmm.
responsible for that. And it's just not the case. We just
Yeah.
go back to Psalm 139 that, our babies are fearfully and wonderfully made. And before there was even a single day of their lives, God knew the full extent of them. And he's left nothing to chance.
Hmm.
He's, he knew in his sovereign will, he knew what was coming. And this isn't your fault. Just
Yeah.
as often as I can, trying to help her come back to that. For me, it was the same thought, the
Hmm.
same lie that it's my fault. But it was for me, it was because I know what I've done, I know where I've been, and I just wondered, is this punishment for
Mm.
for my own sin, And yeah, like I said, I know where I've been, I know what I've done, I know what I've been a part of, and I had some conversations with mentors and that kind of thing, and they're like, dude, that's not the heart of God for you, you
Mm.
know. Find me back to Ezekiel 18, where it says the soul who sins is the one who will die. The son will not share the guilt of the father, nor the father will share the guilt.
Mm.
And so this isn't punitive. This is um, being used by God to refine you and to prepare you for something great. And um, but it's not tied to your sin. You
Right.
can let go of that one. So
That one sticks, huh? Like that I mean, when you think about Satan and using what's going to hurt us, I mean, that one, like go back to your past, this is everything that you've done, you deserve this, it's your fault. Gosh, yeah, I mean, you really have to have the right people around you, godly community, scripture, prayer, everything to be able to combat that because I know that takes deep root when tragedies happen. It's even the tendency of people to put that on us as well. Like, oh, maybe this is because of, hey, you weren't present, or hey, you missed that one birthday, whatever, But gosh, that just multiplies the pain so much more. Um, it sounds like from what you were sharing that most people responded pretty positively and encouragingly. What was there anyone, or were there times where someone may have said something that hurt more times than others? I'm just thinking about, how when people do try to comfort, that sometimes just like, ouch, like it just hurts more. But you
not to say,
understand because like no one knows really what to say. But when they do say it's like, don't say
yeah,
that.
my wife. I wish my wife was out here right now. Just she'd be the one that could spout off. Here's what not to say. Boom, 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 boom. That she could
Mm,
probably send you some notes to add into the show notes or something later. But
mm,
yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. But there have been moments that Chrissy's had to, you know, I usually let things roll off pretty easily. There's some
mm.
things that just kind of stick in a mom's heart for a little while, and
Oh yeah.
you know, there's a process there. But yeah, people always mean well,
Yeah.
but
Mm.
it's a good thing to know. Maybe just go Google, everyone listening, just go Google, here's what not to say
Yeah.
if someone who goes through this, just so it's in the
Mhm.
back of your brain. Um,
Right.
like I said before, the best thing you can do is just to say there's nothing that we can say.
Just be
Here's the
present.
scripture to provide some hope, and I'm
Hmm.
here for you. I'm here.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good. How did this all change your prayer life, community, scripture? Like, how did it change any of that? Did it become more? Did it just how did it change, or did it change at all? I think sometimes when we go through tough times, there's aspects of our Christian walk that we emphasize more. So whether that be community, whether it be prayer, whether it be scripture reading, and then there's just other times where it calls for a deep commitment to prayer, because we're going through a very difficult process. I never knew how to pray for angry at God. I thought you weren't supposed to get angry at God. Growing up, if you get angry at your parent, you are quieted because, hey, you're not supposed to talk to me like that. And sometimes we attribute that to God and say, well, I can't be angry at God because he's going to tell me to shut up. He's probably going to give me another punishment because of that. Um,
Yeah.
so
Right.
how
Yeah.
did that change?
Yeah. No, I felt like I as we were going through this, I felt kind of like I do after a run. It's something I've started to do recently, and I hate it. There's nothing I hate more than running, it turns out.
Mm.
But it's something I need, and
Mm.
so it's something I do every once in a while, not as often as I should. But at the end, I'm always just gasping for air, and
Mm.
that's kind of how I felt spiritually as we were going through this. That I needed more intake and more exhale than, like, spiritually speaking, more intaking of, like, taking scripture in, and more voicing prayers to God than at any other point in my life. And um the more I dug in, the more I realized, like, just how good scripture is, and
Mhm.
how it touches down in our lives in ways that things that we read before hit different now, or going back to the Psalms and realizing every human emotion is here, and no matter what we're going through, whether it's from the best of from the joy end of the spectrum to the despair end of the spectrum, it's there.
Mm.
And Job,
Mm.
reading through that, and getting a deeper understanding of the sovereignty of God, and that was just it gave me a new appreciation for scripture, and in my prayer life than I had before. But like I said, that was after some processing. There was a time where I just needed to step back for a second, get some counseling, um,
Mm.
have some people speak into my life, and begin that healing process. And then I
Right. Which is okay, right? It's one of those things where we feel bad even about doing that. Like there is this time of kind of pulling back a little bit to get the picture and then re-engage that with more vigor and commitment, it seems. Tyler, I don't have this on our questions, but obviously being in ministry, I was just thinking about, you were talking about inhaling or intaking a lot more. But when you're doing that and you're also doing ministry, like what was the balance there? Because it could feel like you're constantly on drain, or it could feel like you were talking about earlier about, gosh, what's the thing that we do? Just kind of compartmentalizing everything. Okay, here's ministry, here's family, here's my grief time. How did you work that with ministry? Because you work with
yeah,
college students, yeah.
yeah. Well, this was, I mean, I
Oh,
think
that's fine.
in God's, like, sovereign will over my life, like, He made sure that was actually before those
Mm.
things happened, before I stepped back into ministry. I was out of ministry for a season. I was helping with the church plant at this point. But this is before I stepped into the college ministry position
Okay.
here. I was you're right, though. Had I been in a, the second loss was, it was after I'd taken the position.
Yeah.
So we did go through that, and there was a season where I had to step back, and this is where I just enjoyed the blessing of having a team
Mm.
around me. That was one of the first things I did in the position, was get a team around me, and they were the ones that, and without me even having to ask them, what can I do? I've got Wednesday, I've got Sunday, things were covered, and
Hmm.
so I was given the space to step back and just be with family, be a dad, be a husband, heal myself, at
Hmm.
least begin that process. Because if I had been forced to jump right back in, that would not have been healthy. That would not
Yeah.
have been, yeah.
Definitely a different feel. Yeah. And I think, to your point, like God kind of takes care of us in that sense as he organizes things and then gives us the wisdom to be able to find ways to manage that as well. But man, gosh, Tyler, I know this has been maybe in a lot of ways hard to talk about. I really hope that as people tune in, that they are able to find comfort and peace in the midst of their losses, because I think the feelings of loss feel similar in other instances, but I know that there's a lot of people who also have experienced the loss of a child, and I know it is going to be a blessing for them. So I really thank you and appreciate you sharing that. And before we close out, though, I did want to ask, what's a word of encouragement for other people that, as a Christian, just as a Christian, as a parent, as a husband, just any word of encouragement that you have for those who may be listening.
Yeah, I hopefully everything that's been said up to this point has been an encouragement to you. And just I think the mantra, I guess if you can call it that, the phrase that was in my head throughout the healing process of my most recent loss, was that God is good when life is not. The reality is we live in a broken world, and no one's immune from things like this happening. Jesus promises us that in this world you will have trouble. He follows it up with, but take heart, I've overcome the world. That's an incredible promise, but that doesn't really take away from the sting of just the difficulty of walking through this broken life, walking through this broken world that we live in. And it's a difficult one. And even when it's difficult, God is still good. He's not a shade less good than he was going great. He is there, every bit as much at work, probably even more at work in your life, and preparing you for something great. I came across a Tozer quote recently that just reminded me of just a really important truth that he said, it's doubtful that God could truly bless a man until he's deeply wounded him, or something to that effect. It's doubtful that God could use someone greatly until he's been wounded deeply. And so just be assured that God is every bit as good now as he was before, and that this isn't without purpose, that this is being used in your life to fortify your faith, not cause it to crumble. And to use you in the lives of someone else to give them hope, to give them to fortify their faith, to do greater things than you ever dreamed would be even possible to come out of.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, I know that I've been blessed by it, both watching it from afar, having this conversation with you. We should just have conversations every 2 weeks and just make that a podcast.
There you go, man.
Just throwing that out.
Actually, I got a podcast that we're getting ready to launch back in a couple weeks.
The college one?
Summer podcast for our college students here at Spotswood. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Intern coming up from Liberty here in the next 2 weeks, and we'll be getting it's called You Asked, We Answered. Shameless plug. There it is.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Just love answering questions that young adults are asking.
Okay. No, that's great. So is all the podcast based off of the questions that they submit? And then you guys are just awesome.
We spend March and April just kind of collecting questions, a bank of 20, 30, 40 questions. And then we spend the summer answering them. So
that's awesome. Good. Well, I will definitely put word out once we release this. And so for those of you guys who are listening, I hope that this was a blessing for you, Tyler. Again, thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate you and for reaching out and kind of getting this started. And again, I'm thankful for you and your family, and I will see you guys in a couple of weeks or in a month or so. And I'm looking forward to that. And again, for those of you guys who are listening, again, leave a review on the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. I love hearing what you guys have to say just about the topics that we're covering. It sounds like it's touching a lot of you guys' hearts in regards to that. So thank you for that. Tyler, we'll catch up soon. Thank you, brother.
See you, Sam.